Can you give me a test? Testing 1 2 1 testing 1 2.
Testing 1 2 1 2 1 2.
Sounding good. Ready when you are.
Okay.
Here we go. Make sure you got people in here. Okay, here we go.
Hello, I'm Dr. Steve Hassan. It is Wednesday, October 8th, 2 p.m. Eastern, doing my weekly live stream. I love these opportunities to spread my work across different social media platforms. We always are able to find new people who are not familiar with my work yet, and something where people can share this live stream as well with their followers. So I want to thank my team. And I just want to say things are getting more and more extreme every week. And the most recent news just before I came on is that Trump is now saying that Illinois Governor Pritzker and the mayor should be arrested because they're opposing National Guard troops that they don't need and don't want. But this whole militarization that Trump is initiating, and this is a follow-up of last week's debacle with the 800 top military officials saying there's an enemy within, is so troubling. And it's so clear to people with their eyes open, and certainly to Europe and to the rest of the world, that this is a coup. And, all I can say is we need to get past the I can't believe this is happening and take care of ourselves psychologically and protect ourselves to the extent that we can, but also do something, at least one thing a day, that will contribute to resistance against this horrible series of events that are happening. James Comey has pleaded not guilty, but Trump is doing all the things he accused the Democrats of doing against him. But he's going after his enemies. And guess what? I'm one of them. Apparently, Trump has labeled all people who oppose him Antifa, which is a non-entity, but stands for anti-fascist. And so, folks, educate yourselves. Please understand my lane is brainwashing, mind control, psychology. And I just can't emphasize enough that we need to spend less time online, especially hearing the same news story over and over and over in a silo. Spend more time in our community in real life, meeting our neighbors, engaging them, and certainly reaching out to family members and friends who are open to having a discussion with us and just asking them, what do you think? What are your feelings? And pick topics that you know were always important to them prior. So if they were farmers, talk about the tariffs. If you have a relative who's a government worker and now the government's entering its second week of the shutdown, ask them how they feel about the GOP. And the critical thing is really influencing the GOP, because we know that Trump has this agenda. He's got the Heritage Foundation Project 2025. He's now very open about it. And Vote is very, apparently, from what I'm reading, is happy about the shutdown, and as far as he's concerned, the government should never reopen. And who benefits from that? It's certainly not any politician who's been elected by citizens who are their constituents. And people need to wake up. I also want to add that the Democratic Congresswoman voted into office has not been sworn in. She would make the 218th vote for discharging the Epstein files. And have you noticed how we're not hearing about the Epstein files? Because there's so many other urgent news stories that are happening. So we have a problem, and it's not going to go away, and we really need to be united. We need to also reach out to people who've never voted, who are citizens, and register them to vote. But the fear that we all have is all of this militarization that's happening is going to interfere with free and fair elections next year, because Trump and the GOP are pretty sure they won't get voted back into office if people have the ability to exercise their constitutional right. So all I can say is the world is changing dramatically, and it's very sad. But we need to keep our energy up. We need to sleep at night. We need to go out in nature. But we also don't want to put our heads in the sand and say we can't deal with it, therefore we won't be following the news. So my 2 cents is follow the news, get the news stories in the morning for a number of minutes, get the news stories in the afternoon. For those of you who are activists and want to follow me, I'm going to be doing an hour live every Wednesday, and we're posting on doing lives on my Substack. I did a live stream yesterday with Lev Parnas quite spontaneously. He went live, and I decided to just listen, and then he invited me to speak. So that's on his Substack. And Lev agreed that it would be a good idea for me to contribute an article for his Substack on Russians who've kidnapped Ukrainian children and are brainwashing them to be good Russians and to not be good Ukrainians, alienating them from their family, their culture. So I did a piece that should be going up on Lev's Substack, and I believe we'll have a copy on my Substack as well. And again, I ask folks who have $5 a month to please become a subscriber, and please invite people that you know are activists to come and check out my Substack, because we're really doing a lot of extra content now. Because we want to educate the public about brainwashing, mind control, and the cult of Trump. I know there are probably folks with questions they want to ask. I'm open to answering your questions to the best of my ability. And thank you, Cammy's putting up. Kristen on Substack asks, do you think Trump's weird grabby handshake is part of a version of handshake induction versus just dominance display? And also, could you please speak to the Stanford prison experiment findings and how they relate to increasing hostility by military-dressed ICE agents, that us versus them dynamic? Thank you. Wow, 2 incredibly important questions, Kristen. Wow. So let me take the first question, and I haven't talked about this really since Trump was in the White House the first time. I know that I talked about it a lot when he was vying to get the GOP nomination for the Republican Party. But a very standard hypnosis technique is called the handshake induction. And essentially, to understand it, it's known for us in the biz as a pattern disruption technique or a confusion technique. Because when you're shaking someone's hand, it's typical you reach out your hand, you do a pump, and you release. But when somebody doesn't release you and keeps holding on, the average person goes, "What's going on? Why isn't he releasing it?" So you're not present, fully present, but you're internal. And it makes people very susceptible at that moment to words that are being uttered, especially if it's done with a hypnotic voice. And Trump has a hypnotic voice, to put ideas in people's heads. I'll just add another version of a pattern disruption. I want to mention the Access Hollywood hot mic, where Trump talks about grabbing women by their genitals and how women like it because you're a celebrity. Well, unless you're a woman who's been assaulted before or understands hypnosis and such, most women, if a strange man puts his hand on their privates, is in shock. But in that moment, if the person says, "Oh, you're so beautiful, you made me touch you," it's a way of bypassing critical faculties. So regarding Trump and handshakes, I always am looking at what he's saying, what he's not saying, what he's doing, and his use of words. And I wrote about In the Cult of Trump. If you haven't read it yet, I still think it's very valuable as an explanatory framework for how we've gotten to where we are. I went back to Edward Bernays in 1928 and his book Propaganda, and how we are now in the digital age of mind control. And then the second question is about my mentor, Philip Zimbardo, who passed away last year, and his groundbreaking Stanford prison experiment. I strongly recommend going to his website, and there's a Hollywood movie about the Stanford prison experiment that Zim, he liked to be called Dr. Z in the last few years of his life, okayed about that story. It's one of 3 social psychology experiments I regularly use to teach about how social psychology is so important to understand the whole construct of mind control and brainwashing. And I talk about the Ash conformity study, the Milgram Milgram obedience study, and the Zimbardo prison study. What Zim did in, I think it was 1971, was create a mock prison in the basement of Stanford University's psychology department, and tested healthy young men and randomly divided them between prisoners and guards. And a 2-week experiment had to be called off in 6 days because some prisoners were having breakdowns, and some of the guards, led by one man, Eshelman, became very sadistic and authoritarian and abusive to the extreme. And part of what was understood by this experiment is that if you give people a uniform, and I think that's what Kristen was alluding to, you give them a guard's uniform, you give them mirrored sunglasses, and in the case of ICE, they are also masked. It allows them to be more free to be abusive and controlling, especially if they're following other people who are acting that way. And we know from neuroscience that we do get influenced. We get what's known as entrained through mirror neurons by the people that we're associating with. And to that point, I'd like to talk about, for those people who are protesting ICE and their abusive things. I believe Cami told me that last night they broke into a residence and zip-tied children residents, and there were snipers on the roof. There's no reason to militarize and do this all or nothing, good versus evil, us versus them, authoritarian mind control thing. But that's what Trump is pushing on us. And so the masks, the uniforms. So what I was trying to get to is to say, if you're a protester, the last thing you want to do is, in my opinion, but I'm a peacenik and I'm a love guy. I'm not someone who's for violence in any way, shape, or form, or terrorism. But I think you want to appeal to the guards and the ICE people's authentic selves and talk to them in a respectful way, saying, we're not your enemy. We're American citizens too. We understand you've been hired to do a job, but please think about what you're doing. Conscience matters. If you believe in God, God's watching. If people don't believe in God, that won't work. But the idea is to create dissonance in the ICE agents and not amplify that we're enemies, that they are the enemies of citizens. We want to remind them we are their neighbors. And this is part of the psychology of bringing in National Guard troops from another state, because they're not neighbors. If it's the National Guard from Texas doing this to Texans, that will be more effective. It'll be easier for National Guard troops from another state to be abusive. So as you can tell, part of what I'm trying to do is educate people about social psychology, how the mind works, neuroscience, the power of language, how to ask questions. There are some people who are really, really effective communicators, and I want to implore them to explain how to mirror. Mirror is to repeat back to the person what they just said so that they feel heard. And if the ICE agent is saying step back, I would say, I hear you, officer. You're saying to step back. I hear you. But I need to ask you, how do you feel about what you're doing to that woman whose face is on the ground? Can you imagine how you would feel if it was your mother who was thrown to the ground like you're doing to this woman? Would your mom be proud of you? Would your dad be proud of you? These types of questions. Let's see, Cami is saying, Butch Maltby on Substack asks, is cult language protected constitutionally? Well, the GOP had used for 10 years free speech as a way of excusing their lies and their conspiracy theories, saying it's free speech, it's constitutionally protected. But now Trump is doing cancel culture and censoring people who are exercising their free speech. And by the way, peaceful protest is free speech. So when you ask about is cult language, what I do want to say about cult language, if you are familiar with Robert J. Lifton's 8 Criteria of Brainwashing from his 1961 book, Studying Chinese Communist Brainwashing, he talked about loaded language and how they're words that are used by the oppressive brainwashers that shuts down critical thinking. So fake news or Antifa are examples of Trump's cultic language. I believe that the purpose of communication is the person who's communicating needs to think, who are they talking to, and then how to take the message they want to convey and translate it into a way that the person who's the recipient will be able to respond to and hear. And that's another piece that I like to teach is especially in a family system with a child or with a spouse, you want to say, teach me how to say what I just said in a way that would work for you. And ask the person to think about how you could have said X in a way that would have worked instead of triggered your partner or upset your partner. Let's see, Paulette, budget astrophotographer and counselor. That's interesting. Budget astrophotographer and counselor. That's an interesting combo. Someone needs to do a study on Fox News and how it has brainwashed millions in this country to believe in Trump. Actually, Brian Stelter, who used to have a show on CNN called Reliable News, wrote a book on Fox. And Brian was the first major media person to interview me regarding my book, The Cult of Trump, when it came out in 2019. We have a re-released version before the 2024 election with a foreword by George Conway and an afterword by myself. But he talked about it, Fox News being a mind control cult, authoritarian mind control cult for the people who work there, as well as for their propaganda messaging. So I'm very interested, if I ever had the funds and the access to neuroscientists, I'm very interested in taking propaganda videos of the Trump cult and analyzing it frame by frame, or at least minute by minute. Let's see, Camille says, Cat on Substack says they're doing this because they have made all non-Trump supporters the other. I'm petrified this will be America's Holocaust. Yeah, this is the authoritarian playbook, and it's something that has always been done when you're mobilizing troops to go to war against the enemy, is to dehumanize them, call them vermin, call them, evil. And that's why it's so important to keep humanizing ourselves in the minds of the people who are being sent out to harm us. Regarding the Holocaust version, I honestly am so worried about RFK. I've been doing some pieces on his so-called MAHA, Make America Healthy Again agenda. He's dismantled the top scientists who are experts in vaccines and pandemics. And so why would they do that? There's no justification at all in terms of science and healthcare. And I know for sure he has lied about Paul Offit and other experts in vaccines, saying it causes autism and other things like that. But I honestly believe that the powers that are influencing Trump and MAGA, they want a lot of Americans to die. And I think, the mentality is the billionaires, they'll always be able to afford health care and medical treatment. They'll have their own doctors. They'll have access to vaccines. But for the millions of people who are going to be kicked off of health care because of the increasing premiums. And that's, by the way, I forgot to mention that, but that is what why the Democrats say, no, we're not rubber stamping your budget again like we did last time. We want people to really know that they're going to be getting letters soon about how their health care premiums are going to double, triple, or many people are going to not have health care anymore. And what's the psychology? Well, these libertarians, these people are like, well, we have too many people getting benefits. We're spending too much money on them. But if they died, then we wouldn't have to pay them Social Security. We wouldn't have to pay for their medical treatment. So that's where I think the Holocaust or the potential mass deaths are going to happen. And it's shocking and it's immoral. And who would want this? China, Russia, Iran, North Korea. And I have to keep remembering back when they were saying COVID was a hoax, and all these new apostolic reformation prophets and apostles, which are a major part of the cult of Trump, were saying it was a hoax, or how they blessed a handkerchief, and if people in the congregation would pay for the handkerchief, they would be protected from COVID. And then you see them in the ICU dying of COVID, and people were not doing what I was recommending they do, which is go to the constituents when the so-called prophet or apostle was dying after he said it was a hoax, and say he was wrong. Listen to his words in the ICU. Excuse me. Let's see. Linda Saul, ICE assaulted a priest kneeling and praying. Do you really think they have a conscience? Do you think they want to talk about their feelings? They have no feelings. Linda, I know it can look that way. And for some people who have taken the buyout to become ICE agents and have no law enforcement training, maybe they're gang members. Maybe they're some of the criminals who Trump unconditionally pardoned, who did the violent coup attempt on January 6th. Maybe they're psychopaths and they don't have any feelings. But from my vantage point, to do an all or nothing in reverse against all of the people in the cult of Trump, I think it's a mistake. And I do know people are starting to leave MAGA. They're starting to message on social media. It's not getting the algorithm support that it should have because the bad owners, the Zuckerbergs, the Musks, etc. But I think we have to act as if. And I also want to say that after Kirk was shot, there was a AP article that said there was massive disinformation trolling happening from Russia, China, and Iran, messaging the left and the right, it's time for civil war, time to get your guns and, get rid of the evil other. And this is part of what I wrote about in the cult of Trump, and I've documented in my interviews that are on Substack and in my podcast. Psychological warfare is aimed not just for one part of the continuum, but both extremes, to make them more extreme, to polarize and confuse. And the vast number of people are in the middle who are not extreme on the left or the right. And so when people say, oh, you're always talking about the right, Steve, why don't you talk about the left authoritarianism? I do talk about left authoritarianism. I'm not an anarchist. I am not a communist. Guess what the largest cult on planet Earth is? It's China. 1.5 billion people. And by the way, I didn't mention this, but Ellison apparently bought TikTok. And I've seen at least 2 posts, some people saying that their post that was going viral got deleted by or censored by TikTok. I know I've been thrown off TikTok when I'm doing lives, at least a few times in the last couple of months. But I think it's going to get more extreme. And Americans don't realize, but TikTok in China is completely regulated, and disinformation, they don't want their children to be anxious and addicted and to have less attention span. But they're wanting to do psychological warfare on the West. Let's see. Graham Moses on Substack asks, did you ever read about Roger Ailes' interview with Charles Manson? He was the first to do that. No. Interesting question. Please send it to center@freedomofmind.com if you have that. Before we go on to the next question, I just want to say that on Monday, I did a live stream regarding Manson and the good work of a law professor, Keith Watley, who created a nonprofit called Uncommon Law. And one of the Manson victims, Patricia Krenwinkel, who was involved with the gruesome murders of 2 individuals in the Manson cult, is up for parole. She came up for parole in 2022, and in May of this year was recommended that she's no harm. And this is a unique feature of California law that says if somebody has been in jail for decades and is a model prisoner and is zero threat to the public, that they should have eligibility. Well, it's up to Gavin Newsom. And so I agreed to do a live stream. Please come and check it out. I know we have a copy up on my YouTube channel, Dr. Stephen Hassan. But I was making the case that when I was in the Moonies, if Moon said, take this gun and go kill, people, I would have done it. I was so brainwashed. I was so programmed that everyone outside of the group who opposed us was Satan, and it was demons. And so I was fortunate to be deprogrammed after 2.5-year involvement. And that's what led to me dedicating my whole life and my career. It's 49 years now. So I was trying to appeal to Gavin Newsom and his people and the people of California. And by the way, I think California is voting on whether or not they can redistrict to counter the Trump redistricting thing in Texas. Because again, the GOP was trying to cheat, and so California, I hope, will pass this so that there can be more Congress people from California in Congress. Anyway, I think I lost my train of thought. Anyway, we'll go on. Rod Brown John. Hi, Steve. Would you consider Ann Applebaum as a guest soon? Winner of a Pulitzer Prize, exposer of oppression and dictatorship around the world. I love Ann Applebaum's work, and I would be honored to interview her for my podcast. By the way, we rebranded my podcast, Cults, Culture, and Coercion. I don't know Anne personally, but if you do, please tell her that to have me on her show, or that Steve would be honored to have her on. I've had Ann Nelson on a couple of times. So I think she's great. I also love Heather Cox Richardson. I would do anything to meet with her online. And yeah, there's a lot of very top people. Tim Snyder is another person I admire greatly, and I would be honored to interact with online. But I'm concerned that we're just messaging to us, and we're not messaging to the people whose minds need to be educated about brainwashing actually exists in China, and pimps and traffickers do brainwashing and explain the influence continuum and explain the bite model. And we need to reach out to folks. And if you haven't downloaded a copy of the Influence Continuum, please go to freedomofmind.com, download it, print it out in color. You can laminate it, or you can just print 50 copies and ask all of the shopkeepers or your doctor, your dentist, and other massage therapists, chiropractors, put it up in the office, because we want to educate people. All influence is not bad, just as I believe all cults are not inherently bad. I'm just concerned about authoritarian mind control cults. Apologies for the siren in the background. Let's see. Next, some people speculate that Kirk and some other conservatives like Marjorie turning on MAGA talking points, becoming anti-Israel and pro-releasing the Epstein files because of Russia influence. That's the word I have, is that there are Putin people like Kirk and God, I'm forgetting his name. Certainly Marjorie Taylor Greene was a big QAnon promoter. That they were starting to push the Epstein files because Putin didn't like that Trump wasn't doing everything that he was told to do. And so I'm just looking at all this blue stuff that's happening on my virtual background. Sorry, guys. It's, I'm not a political person. I'm a psychology person. I'm a human rights person. I'm for women's rights, gay rights, trans rights, indigenous rights, rights of children. I want us to live together on planet Earth. I really believe that climate crisis has been, just pushed aside with all of this stuff. But guess who is funding the Trump election campaign and getting all of these agreements? Is the fossil fuel corporations, the Saudis, the Russians, who have oil. And global climate warming is a crisis, and it's a major crisis. I see that and AI, unregulated AI, as big threats. And neither are going to be regulated because of deals cut with the Trump administration. I know that Europe is attempting to do things. Let's see. User 7506 on TikTok asks, watching from the UK, is there any way the liberals of the USA are going to be able to reverse this? I keep hope alive. And it's not just the liberals, but it's the independents. It's not just the Democrats, it's everybody. And my hope is with former cult members, people who were raised in authoritarian regimes, people who understand what it's like to live in a mind control environment, speaking up and sharing their stories. I see my solution is psychoeducation, and I hope to have the resources one day soon to videotape courses of how to talk to MAGA people, effectively. I know that Monty Mader and I have been talking about doing a Substack live together, and then also recording some video, and she could be a Christian nationalist because she was raised as one. If you don't know Monty Mader, it's Montemader. She's brilliant, she's beautiful, she's a musician, but she really knows her Bible, and she's really loves to learn and likes to teach about history. So we're talking about recording some role plays of how to interact, what works and what doesn't work together. But I would love to hear from former MAGA people too, who are willing to be public, who can play themselves, whatever months ago that they were still believing it. And also do an interview about what was it that finally broke through. I know for me, in the Moonies, I was sure I was doing God's will, and I was sure that Chinese communist brainwashing was Satan. So when my deprogrammers asked me if I was interested in learning about brainwashing, the 8 criteria of Lifton, I said, sure. And it was going through each one of the 8 criteria that started the wheels turning, because it was very weird, because the Moonies did all the things that the Chinese communists did to brainwash people. It wasn't enough to get me out, but it was a big part of it. The thing that got me out was my deprogrammers handed me one of Moon's speeches and just asked me to read it and tell them what I think. And when I read it for the first time in 2.5 years, a negative thought about Moon entered my mind. And he was appealing to congressmen and senators about how much he respected Americans and how surprised he was that anyone could imagine Americans could be brainwashed by a Korean. And I had been with Moon at least 100 times in person, where he said how dirty our minds were and they needed heavenly brainwashing. And also, I knew that he disrespected Americans tremendously. He thought the Koreans were the master race, and the Japanese were even more superior than the Americans. So when I read it, but they didn't tell me that Moon was a liar. They just handed me one of Moon's speeches. I read it, and I thought, what a liar. And as soon as I said that to myself, I had that negative thought, and it didn't get labeled as satanic invasion and activated my thought stopping programming. It was like a house of cards started to fall apart. And I woke up from my trance, and I realized Moon couldn't be the Messiah if he's a liar. He couldn't be a man of God, and therefore he's not trustworthy. So why would I continue to dedicate my life and work 18 to 21 hours a day, 7 days a week, and recruit people into a group with a liar who does brainwashing? So once that happened, I was done. I was out. And I became a whistleblower for a congressional subcommittee investigation. Let's move on. Larry Robbins 970. What can replace censored social media? What you're asking is, we need legitimate social media that has rules and cares about what's posted, that there aren't deep fake videos and other things like that. And it doesn't exist to my knowledge. I mean, I'm on Blue Sky. Blue Sky is not as easy to use or as robust or have as many followers as X. I'm on Substack right now, but I've been informed that Andreessen and Horowitz are major funders on Substack, and that I should be careful, because if they have that much money invested into Substack, that the Substack may disappear, or that algorithms might get manipulated. But I'm on Substack because all the major people I respect are on Substack right now. And it seems to be the best platform for getting the word out. I follow Heather Cox Richardson regularly, and she keeps saying be on a lot of platforms because if one goes down, people will find you on others. So, but I just wish and hope some billionaires would create a platform with actual rules and fund independent journalism that's committed to journalistic practices of checking sources and such, because we're living in an age of mind control. And if you want to brainwash people, confuse them, overload them, make them not know how to tell what's true and what's not true. And because of my age, for me, I grew up at a time when my family had a radio. Then we got a black and white TV. So I am not conditioned to be on text and on social media. And I have real values in my body, in my heart, that I want to stay aligned with. So it's that self-awareness and maturity that we all need to cultivate and not get into the mob mentality of everyone else is lying, so I should lie too. And we certainly don't want to feed the trolls and share disinformation. Even to say, oh, look how terrible this is. Let's see, Wicked Clown on TikTok asks, so if all cults are not bad, then why does the word have such a negative connotation? It's a great question, and the root of the word cult is culture, which is one reason why my rebranded podcast is Cults, Culture, and Coercion. But it does have a pejorative meaning for many, many people. And I have respected journalist friends who said, Steve, cults will always be negative. Stop saying there are positive cults. But I do believe there are positive cults where people are really into something, takes up a lot of their time, their energy, their money, but there's free will, informed consent, ability to question, ability to leave without fear or harassment, where there's no pseudo-identity, because that's what authoritarian cults create, is a dissociative disorder where there's a cult identity that suppresses your real self. And this is another time we can talk about the military and how if the military in America, if we could rewind it back to before Trump taking office this year, had inspector generals that wanted to ensure that the military would never be given a command that violated the Constitution, because the military is supposed to be apolitical. And yes, the president is the commander in chief, but there was a whole rule of law and conscience that was, and people know what they're getting into, they're paid, and they can leave honorably, and they're not harassed or threatened. Gnosis, Super Chat, $10 from Nexus. Thank you. Every little bit helps, and I'm waiting for the big folks who want to empower freedom of mind to be a much more powerful entity in this fight against authoritarianism. But every $2, $5, $10 is so appreciated. And let's see, if I reached out to my local libraries about hosting talks about cult authoritarian control, would you be interested in live streaming and an event to do a talk? Hypothetically, yes. I'm live streaming, so I'd love to coordinate it. And if we could coordinate it so that libraries around the world, or at least all around the United States, people could set up a computer and a screen and notify their local communities, sure. Way back when, I was paid $5,000 for an hour talk at a university or at some major conference to keynote. I've been doing things for free just because I want to get the word out. So, I mean, I'm walking the walk, and I'm really funding my efforts. I have Jerry, who's volunteering to do these live streams on Wednesday, but everyone else is a part-time person that I'm paying because they deserve to be paid. I just wish I could pay them what they deserve, but we're on a budget. Let's see. Anna Welty on Substack says, talk to Jessica Denson. She's great as a prior MAGA member who won her court case to overturn a bunch of NDAs. So my request is, I don't have the resources to reach out to people. Please reach out to influencers. Please reach out to ex-MAGA people. Tell them about my books. I don't know if she's read The Cult of Trump yet, or Combating Cult Mind Control, or is aware I have a course for clinicians or for the public that teaches foundational concepts about cults. Please ask them to contact us, and we can schedule things. And just be patient, because, again, there's only so many hours in the day and week. Let's see. Creative name. Is there a classification system for what kind of prospects we're trying to deprogram or encourage to be more informed? Is there a classification system? I would recommend start with family and friends, coworkers, people people you have a historical relationship with. And what I hear from folks is that they saw a radicalization when people got involved with Trump. You know, going back to 2015, nobody thought Trump would ever get elected. Even Trump didn't think he was going to get elected. Michael Cohen said nobody expected Trump to win. What they didn't know is all the bad business happening with Facebook and Cambridge Analytica stealing data and using AI systems to micro-target people, to turn people against the Democrats, etc. But start with people you know, and reach out. And I definitely like the idea of just having an event. And I've recorded so many interesting interviews. If you subscribe to my Substack or my YouTube, you can have access to these. You could show a video at your local library and use it as a discussion group. I'm aware of several people who've had book club things with my books to discuss it. Let's see. Witness with multi-chick. It seems that all cults have something against others. Avoid all known liars. I agree, Dr. Hassan. Again, I'm against authoritarian cults. And if you're not yet familiar with my BITE model of authoritarian control, it discusses behavior control, information control, thought control, and emotional control. And under thought control, I talk about ideologies of authoritarian cults being black and white, us versus them, good versus evil. Very simplistic. There's no complexity. There's no nuance when you're in a mind control cult. And you're either with us or you're against us when you're in a mind control cult. People say, I'm in a Christian church. How do I know it's not a mind control cult? Well, if you say you want to go to the church down the street, are they going to tell you it's filled with demons and Satan? Or are they going to say, well, we hate to see you go, but good luck and stay in touch? I believe legitimate religions are about love, about truth, about compassion, about helping the poor, the sick, the immigrants, all the Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, Islam. Abraham is our forefather, and he had a tent that was open in the desert for any strangers to come and get shade, get water, get food. It's that kind of consciousness we want to encourage with any religious group. And I know Buddhists feel the same way, and there are other religions as well. Let's see, Sith Baking Club. There's a group called Leaving MAGA that aims to help people get out of the cult by giving a friendly, good faith community to reach out to. I'm very familiar with leavingmaga.org and Rich Logis. I interviewed Rich when he first went public. He has since distanced himself from me because he said basically that for the way he's operating, he doesn't want to associate at all with the word cult. And because I wrote the book, The Cult of Trump, he thinks that it's better to build community. I disagree with him heartily. I really believe when you leave a cult, you should understand the influence continuum and the bite model and analyze how they deceived you, what were the critical points, and process it so you don't get recruited into another cult. I think there's a really valuable, important thing to do, because I can tell you there are people who've left Jehovah's Witnesses or the Mormons, never learned about brainwashing or mind control, and now they're in MAGA, or they've gotten into some conspiracy theory cult online. And I want to say Jeffrey Hinton, the godfather of AI, who won a Nobel Prize, when he first left Google and said, "I'm really worried that we're creating a technology we won't be able to control." He said that's going to be able to create cults. And I reached out to Jeffrey. I'm hoping to talk with him one day. But let's go on. We're almost out of time. Drift and explore. What's so sad is this political cult is infecting every aspect of our lives. Was just trying to look up trail information on the USDA Gov website and saw a banner about the radical left. Yes, it's really sad, and the government shutdown is Trump's now, even though he signed a bill in his first round in the White House, saying that if the government shut down, people would get back pay if they continued to work as government officials. Now he's claiming that they may take that away. So think about air traffic controllers who keep us safe, all those planes in the air, and telling them, come to work, but you won't get paid. What effect is that going to have on our economy, on our standing in the world? It's horrible. As we wrap up, I want to say I shared a clip from Jane Goodall, the anthropologist and primatologist who passed away. She did an interview leaving words of wisdom about the need for hope, never give up hope. And this is what keeps me going. Also hearing from you, hearing from people who say, thank you, your work touched me, or you rescued me from a cult 20 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago. That really keeps me motivated, that my mission is so important. And honestly, I'm not aware of anyone else on the planet with my credentials. Was a top leader in the Moonies, is a mental health professional, is now a PhD, has written 5 books, 4 TEDx talks. I don't know of anyone else who can contribute at the level that I'm able to. And I just wish that I had a much, much bigger platform and bigger audience. But if you got something from this live stream, please get the video, share it with your followers if you are activists on social media. If you follow specific influencers on social media, reach out to them and ask them to have me on as a guest. And I want to thank my team. It's our hour has flown by. And sleep 7 to 9 hours. Go out in the woods, play with puppies and cats, and think of your children, your grandchildren, and understand that there's way more good people than people in the destructive authoritarian cult of Trump. And we really need to get together, especially on messaging, and keep saying the government shutdown is all on the Trump GOP. They own the White House, the Senate, and Congress. All the Democrats are asking for is, we don't want millions of Americans to lose their health care. We don't want millions of Americans to have premiums that will double or triple in another month. And the Democrats are counting that people are going to be looking at how much they're paying for eggs and local economy things and health care. That's what enabled them to win previously, is health care. So thank you so much. And please follow me on Substack. If you can afford $5 a month to subscribe, it will really help a lot. And thank you, and see you next week. Take care.